G'day, my name's Becky and I wanted to do a video blog about why I left the Jehovah's Witnesses in response to some of the various blogs from the Happy Freethinker, Dan Merra and Weight Released. These are three bloggers that I have a lot of respect for. They're all survivors and I love what they bring to their posts. The reason I've felt prompted to do this blog is purely because at the moment there's a big hoo-ha about a young girl who sued the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society and won. She sued them because of child abuse that she had suffered, and she was able to unequivocally prove they were responsible for it due to the policy that they do have in writing that states child abuse pedophiles are to be protected for fear of lawsuits. So she won this argument. She asked for $1,444, $1 for every member of the 144,000, and in response she was awarded $28 million. Now, unfortunately, this lawsuit has brought out more veracity and vilification from the Jehovah's Witness trolls than I have ever seen. And I do have to point out that I really don't pay a great deal of attention to these people. In fact, prior to this lawsuit, I didn't give a shit. I really didn't. And I've never actually, up until now, even bothered to get involved with the ex-Jehovah's Witness support groups that are available because I perceived them as being toxic. The few that I did log on to 5 odd years ago seemed to me to be filled with very hateful, very spiteful, very negative vilification of the Watchtower Society. And I understand people's anger, but I'm not really interested in getting involved into the emotional toxicity of things back then and now. I'm happier just to deal with my own baggage and to move on and not be sucked into anybody else's. The thing that also struck me about some of those sites was that people were arguing with each other over semantics. Apparently the Borg didn't do them enough damage, they now need to do damage to each other, and I just found the whole thing futile, which was a shame because there are some really fantastic support groups out there. There are some amazing people out there, and I would now in hindsight strongly encourage anyone who's thinking of leaving the Borg to join one of these sites, but to keep searching until you find the right one. And if it's toxic, blow it off, move on, find another. But getting back to why I left the Jehovah's Witnesses, I did leave the Jehovah's Witnesses over child abuse. What I saw firsthand, it absolutely disgusted me. So I can say from unequivocal personal experience, they most definitely do condone child abuse. As a child, now to give you an example of my childhood, my life, we were a very poor family, still are a very poor family. Brothers, sisters, cousins, we're not particularly well off, it's just not who we are. Education's not been something that any of us have ever had a privilege to get. Up until now, I myself am getting a good education. Now, growing up, I grew up in what can only be described as a ghetto. It was approximately 45 k's in either direction, that's kilometres, of government housing, and it was also the area that if you were a criminal and you got released from prison, that's where you got sent to live out your happily ever after out of prison thing. So growing up, there were 3 convicted pedophiles on my street and there were 2 around the corner. And I actually grew up kind of thinking that child abuse was normal. I understood that it's not allowed, it's not supposed to happen, but I did just accept that it does. My friend from school, my best friend, for example, we met when we were about 6. Now, when we were 6, her father was in prison. Okay, he was in prison for molesting her and raping her older sister and her older brother. By the time I was 10, he got released from prison, and their mother stupidly took him back into the house. He that day had a go at his daughter, and the older brother came in and murdered the father. So, and then fast forward 2 years, and one of the girls I went to school with was raped and beaten and chopped up into little bitty pieces. Another couple of years later, I lived down the road from the bodies in the barrel, which I think the whole world knows about. So, horrific violence of that sort was just something I was very used to, and I certainly accepted. It was pretty much only when my friend's brother murdered his father, which should have been classified as self-defense, but this poor kid ended up doing time in juvie, and that was kind of when I stopped and went, no, this isn't normal. Anyway, in relation to the Jehovah's Witnesses, when I was about 9, my mum, who was a drunk at the time, her Jehovah's Witness friend was a raging alcoholic, and this woman encouraged my mother to drink. Now, this woman decided that she was the horniest woman I've ever known alive. Like, this woman was the freak of all nymphomaniacs, and she decided to marry this fella, because as a Jehovah's Witness is no sex before marriage. Why the hell she didn't just break the laws is beyond me, but anyway. So she marries this guy that she meets in a caravan park, and he starts studying the Bible with the Jovos, and it's decided he's going to get baptized. So he propositions myself and my mum and says, hey, come and spend the weekend with us, which I thought was really weird, because you could have just had us for dinner, mate. We didn't live that far away. But he wanted to have a dinner, and he prepositioned it even further by saying, oh, and I miss my grandkids, so I'd really love a hug from Becky. Anyway, we get there on the day, and I didn't want to give him a hug, actually. I should point out, I didn't want to give him a hug. The church elders instructed me to. They said, look, he's about to be baptized in 2 days, it'll encourage him. So we got there, and I gave him a hug. And when I tried to let go, he grabbed hold of me and wouldn't let me go. And as everybody else just kind of turned their back and continued to walk on, like they didn't realise that anything was abnormal, because he was grabbing hold of me for an inappropriately long time in front of everybody, and he wasn't actually letting me go. He was restraining me with physical force. When everyone turned their back, he decided to try and have a good old feel of my bum, at which stage I've made a noise, and Gaz's turned around, and this old bastard's let go. Now, this old fella, he went and disappeared. He went and hid himself off somewhere. The toilets actually disappeared for 3 hours in the dunnies of the local caravan park. And Gaza noticed that obviously I was acting weird, so he asked me what was wrong, and I told him, and we left. Now, when we went back to the church elders, the Jovo elders, and we told them what was happened, we were specifically told we were not under any circumstances to go to the police. We were not allowed to dob this man in. Now, what made matters worse is it came to light that he had actually been excommunicated or disfellowshipped 20 years earlier for molesting his grandchildren. That's why he hadn't seen his grandchildren in a long time. And not only that, but since then he'd been in and out of prison for molesting other children. But we weren't allowed. And in fact, his daughter never went to the police either about the abuse of his grandchildren. And so that never sat comfortably with me. And even when I got into my teens and I said, I really think I need to go to the police about this, again, it was forbidden. Weren't allowed to go to the police about it, because it would bring reproach upon Jehovah's name, and the organisation didn't want it in the newspapers, because the newspapers would vilify the organisation, as opposed to focusing on the fact that there was a pedophile on the loose. Personally, Adelaide has one of the highest sex crime rates of Australia. I really don't think the newspapers would have given a toss about my little bum feel. But anyway, so that didn't sit comfortably with me, but I got on with my life, and I learned to love that organisation. And I say learned because I was bullied, beaten and traumatised in that organisation. Mine was not a happy, lovey-dovey experience at all. But I was so desperate to prove. As a young child, I got told that you haven't got a father who loves you, so how can you expect God to love you? So I felt this overwhelming urge my whole life, desperation, to prove to God that I had the right to exist. And yes, I suffered from really chronic depression. Alright? I didn't fantasize about killing myself because as a Jehovah, you're not allowed to kill yourself. I just prayed to God that I would be murdered or hit by a bus. I so desperately wanted to die. I would have 3-hour long showers with the music blaring because I was screaming in the bathroom in emotional pain. It was a mess. I was fucked up. Anyway, I got to 24 and I moved away from my family because I realised that that's a whole other set of issues and that I was never going to be emotionally healthy. And also my mum suffers from several autoimmune disorders, so I nursed her for a really, really long time.